American Giant makes great clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, and more right here in the U.S. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Well, it's almost Hunt Palmer. Taylor Sharp sitting in for Hunt Palmer here on the Hunt Palmer Show, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Busy hour number one and hour number two, not slowing down. Look, I've mentioned it multiple times throughout the show, but if for some reason you're just now tuning in and you have not heard yet, Hunt and his wife had their second child yesterday afternoon, so I will be here in the host chair for our guy Hunt Palmer for probably the next 2 or 3 days or so. We'll see how things go and how he is feeling. I want to kind of give you a little hour one recap. Look, we did LSU baseball. The Saints lose Paulson Adebo in free agency to the New York Giants, but they also restructured Derek Carr's contract. What does that do for their salary cap this year? What does it do for 2026? Speaking of the New Orleans Saints, want to go back to them a little bit here because early this morning it was announced that the Saints have traded a 2026 seventh-round pick to the New England Patriots for defensive tackle Davon Godchaux. LSU fans in the area remember Davon Godchaux. He was here at LSU for a number of years. He came in, he started at defensive tackle as a freshman. He played multiple positions along the defensive line. He's been in the NFL for 8 years. Look, he's had a little bit of an up and down NFL career. I mean, the numbers don't exactly jump off the page at you, but he's been solid nonetheless. I mean, his best year was back in 2019. He had 75 total tackles, 6 tackles for a loss, and 2 sacks. That was his best year. Across his 8-year NFL career, 429 tackles, 20 tackles for a loss, 5.5 sacks on the interior of the defensive line. So looking at those numbers, you might say, okay, well, why did the Saints make this trade? He's, an average NFL player. I like this move for the Saints, and I think it can impact their defensive line in a big way. We've talked about it a number of times. Bryan Bresee has shown flashes of being a really good player. Can he put it all together? You need something on the other side of Bresee in the middle of this defense to help free him up a little bit. This gives you that. Signing Davon Godchaux gives you a veteran defensive tackle in the middle of your defense that you can put next to Bryan Bresee. Also, Bresee's still a young player. He just finished his second year in the NFL. He's a guy that's still kind of figuring it out because while he played at Clemson for a number of years, he was injured. I mean, his number of games at Clemson actually wasn't that many. He's still learning. He's still developing. A guy who has been there, done that. He's an 8-year pro in the NFL. He can help Bryan Bresee learn along the way, almost be a mentor to the young player. It's also a step up from what you had. If nothing else, it gives you an extra body. Colin Saunders has been okay, but you had Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, and Bryan Bresee. It's really all you had. You were very, very thin at defensive line. I mean, remember there were talks of, hey, can you move Carl Granderson to the inside? But, I mean, with the amount of pass rushers you have or lack thereof, Granderson kind of has to stay on the outside. I really like this move because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether he had 5.5 sacks in his career or 12 sacks in his career. Look, he's a guy that's been relatively healthy. So he has played in all 17 games 3 years in a row for the New England Patriots. 2022, 2023, 2024. In 21, he played in 16 out of the 17 games. So he's a guy that's been relatively healthy. The last time he did not play a full season was with Miami back in 2020. He only played in 5 games due to injury. But again, I mentioned it, essentially 4 straight seasons with the New England Patriots. He's only missed 1 game in those 4 years. Also, you gave up a 7th-round pick in 2026 to get Davon Godchaux. So again, while the numbers may not jump off, while you may say, man, we needed something more in free agency, At the end of the day, you signed a veteran defensive tackle that can come in and be an immediate starter for you in exchange for a 7th-round pick. Take away the name, take away the numbers, take away whatever. If you bring that to the table for any NFL team, they're probably going to take that deal. Especially a team like the New Orleans Saints who, well, frankly, need all the help they can get. Now that you've got your defensive line on the interior figured out at least a little bit, you're obviously going to try to add another piece or two. But essentially, the front line guys in that rotation is pretty much figured out. Like it or not, that's probably what it's going to be for the New Orleans Saints. What about the edge? Because that's definitely a position that the Saints need to address. It's a position that multiple people have reported that the Saints may target that in the first round. And I know what you're saying. Oh, well, Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, you've had so many misses on this position in the first round. I get it, but at the end of the day, a need's a need. You just haven't drafted well. You still drafted players in positions of need. You just drafted the wrong players. You have an entirely new coaching staff. How much are they going to help Mickey Loomis with this draft process? There's also a guy out there that you could maybe re-sign. What do you do with a guy like Chase Young? Look, he's going to command attention from pretty much everywhere. There's rumors that the Baltimore Ravens are targeting him. The problem I have with re-signing Chase Young is not that Chase Young wasn't good last year, because what was your main concern when you signed Chase Young? Right after you got him, it was reported that he had a neck injury, he was going to miss camp, and everyone freaked out. Chase Young played in all 17 games last season. He had 31 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, 5.5 sacks on the edge. I like Chase Young. I thought he was a fine player for you. You know the talent's there. You've seen it. But Chase Young is going to want a long-term deal. If you're the Saints, are you willing to give Chase Young a long-term deal? Should be the bigger question. I'm going to say no. Like, I like Young, but he's probably going to command a lot of money just because not just fans here in New Orleans, all across the league wanted to see if Chase Young could finish a season fully healthy. He did that. He had 5.5 sacks on the edge. His numbers weren't eye-popping, but the main thing you wanted to see, you saw, was the health of Chase Young. He looked good. He flashed for you at times in some pretty big moments. Chase Young is probably going to garner a little bit more attention and a little bit more money than you're wanting to spend on a player like Chase Young. Because there's a lot of big name guys out there. Matthew Judon is a veteran. I mean, he's up there in age, but he's a super productive player in the NFL. I get that he is linked to the 49ers, but as of this moment, Joey Bosa is still technically out there. Now, a lot of teams are going to be after Joey Bosa. How much are you willing to pay for him? The Dolphins are interested. Obviously, the mutual interest between him and the San Francisco 49ers. He's expressed the desire to play with his brother. I ultimately think that's where he's going to go. But look, if you look at the numbers of Joey Bosa, for the most part, they're there. The last couple of years, it's not that he's been bad. He just hasn't been in the lineup. He signed a big contract after 2021. Since then, he has played in 19 games over a 3-year period, and he has 15 sacks in 3 seasons. Again, in 19 games. So in 19 games, he has 15 sacks. He's actually been pretty productive. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field. But before those injuries caught him, here's what he did. From 2016 to 2021, 10.5 sacks, 12.5 sacks, 5.5 in a year he only played in 7 games, 11.5, 7.5, 10.5. So in his career, he has played in double-digit games 6 times in his 9-year career. He has 10 sacks or more in 5 of those 6 years. When he's on the field, he's a productive player, and he's still only 29 years old. The problem is, if you're not willing to pay a player like Chase Young that much money, do you really want to pay Joey Bosa? Because at this point in their career, I don't know how much difference there is between the two guys. I like Joey Bosa. He's been a lot more proven of a guy, but Chase Young's younger. He's coming off of a season where he played in all 17 games. You can't say that for a guy like Joey Bosa. So while Bosa's a big name, any concern you have with Chase Young, you pretty much got to double it with Joey Bosa. 1, he's older. 2, he's going to command a lot more money than Chase Young. And 3, he hadn't been as healthy as Chase Young in recent years. Up until last year, I would have said, yeah, absolutely. It's just been a bit of bad luck. But Chase Young proved he could stay on the field. Joey Bosa hasn't been able to stay on the field for 3 seasons now. He's missed more games than he's played over that span. So I like Joey Bosa. That might be a little much for me. Price range wise, looking at what else the Saints need, looking at his injury history over the last 3 years, I like Bosa. You certainly call him, kind of see interest. If he would do that 1 year prove it deal, I don't think he would, but there's always a chance. So call him, kick the tires on it for sure, but I don't know if that's a realistic option. So if you move on from Chase Young, you don't sign Joey Bosa in free agency. What do you do on the perimeter? Because again, you got the interior figured out with the signing of Davon Godchaux. If you're at 9 overall and you're not absolutely in love with Will Johnson, like we talked about earlier, and you don't sign a corner round 1, there's a chance you could go edge rusher. And again, I get it. I know Saints fans are like, hey, we've been bitten by edge rusher enough. I understand that. But you've also reached on a lot of guys. I don't think anybody was chomping at the bits to sign Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner in the first round when you did that. You reached on those guys. 2 guys that could potentially be there when you're drafting 9 overall actually both come from the Georgia Bulldogs. We know how those players have fared in the NFL on the defensive side of things. Ask the Philadelphia Eagles. The first name I want to mention is Mykel Williams. 3 years at Georgia, 23.5 tackles, 14 sacks, very productive. Scouts love this guy. I mean, he is projected to be a lock in the first round. The other guy is a teammate of Williams, again at Georgia, Jalen Walker. 3 years at Georgia, 19 tackles for a loss, 12.5 sacks. So both very productive players. They could come in, they could be day one starters for you on the edge. Because I'm good with bringing, like Carl Granderson, having him on one side. Carl Granderson's not your number 1 pass rusher, though. Carl Granderson's job will be take a little bit of pressure off the guy on the other side because you have a solid quality pass rusher. You need a stud on the other side of Granderson in order for him to be fully effective, in my opinion. Mykel Williams could come in, potentially be that guy. Jalen Walker could potentially come in and be that guy. If you do that, let's say it is Mykel Williams. You would have a D-line of 2 veterans and 2 really young players. Your veterans being Davon Godchaux and Carl Granderson. And then your young guys, Brian Brzee, who's entering his 3rd year in the NFL, and he's shown some flashes. The consistency just needs to be there a little bit more. And Mykel Williams, who was a really good player on a really good defense, was coached by Kirby Smart, who in the college game, best in the business on that side of the ball. We know that. Or Jalen Walker, also at Georgia, also under Kirby Smart. I'm not saying that's what they're going to do in the first round, but you could do a lot worse, especially if you don't want to re-sign a guy like Chase Young. All right, look, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we get back, LSU football was on the practice field for the first time on Saturday for spring practice. There was a notable absence. We'll dive into that, and I'll tell you why. It may not be as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. That's coming up on the other side here on the Hunt Palmer Show, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Welcome back in. Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp here with you, sitting in for Hunt Palmer, who is a brand new father of 2. Teased it a little bit going into break right there. LSU football team started out on the practice field on Saturday to kick off spring practice. And a guy who is a projected starter on the offensive line was not present. That player is Josh Thompson. He was the transfer offensive lineman from Northwestern. Now, he was not with the team on Saturday afternoon, and here's why. He was back in Evanston completing his bachelor's degree. If you remember, he's a transfer from Northwestern. Unlike LSU, Northwestern works on the quarter system instead of the traditional semester system. Look, he's expected to complete his current coursework and exams by March 21st. He wants to get his degree. He's set to join the team thereafter. Reports are around March 27th. So that's fine because LSU doesn't wrap up their practice until their spring game, which is going to be on April 12th. So he'll hit about half of spring practice. This is a veteran guy. He's played guard. He's played tackle for Northwestern. He's played in a ton of games. I think he'll be fine. Look, he played 4 seasons at Northwestern. He started at both right tackle and right guard during his time as a Wildcat. He's projected to compete at guard and tackle, and kind of projected to lock down one of those starting spots, which is ultimately why you bring him in. For what it's worth, according to LouisianaSports.net, a source indicated that LSU's first offensive line, so the starting O-line day one of camp, consisted of Tyree Adams at left guard, Paul Mabinga at left tackle, Braylon Moore, the Virginia Tech transfer, who appears to be taking over that center spot. That allows DJ Chester to kick out the guard, which is his more natural position, which is where DJ Chester was at right guard. And then the highly talented guy that came in a year ago, Weston Davis, at right tackle. That is from left to right. If you remember Braylon Moore, he started 24 games for the Hokies in his career. He is expected to be that first-team center. Again, DJ Chester could move out to guard. Now, when I first heard this, I was like, oh, man, kind of a blow. Not a big deal. Josh Thompson's still going to join the team because, he's already signed. It's not like he's not coming. He's just finishing up his schoolwork. Man, that guy misses out on valuable reps. However, the more I thought about it, there's actually a ton of silver lining here. Look at the younger guys that can get valuable reps in the spring. I just mentioned what the reported starting offensive line was. Let's say Josh Thompson takes over at right tackle. I kind of think that's where he's going to wind up this year. I think they brought him in to play tackle instead of guard. I feel like you're a little bit deeper at guard. So it would be Adams, Mabinga, Moore, Chester, Josh Thompson. But that kind of prevents a younger, talented guy like a Weston Davis from getting as many reps as he's getting. Look at Tyree Adams. He's trying to lock down a tackle position, likely at left tackle. But look at some of your early enrollees that are younger guys. Solomon Thomas is coming in. He's a 5-star early enrollee. Now, he's projected at inside, but again, Josh Thompson can play guard or tackle. Solomon Thomas is going to get more early reps. Carius Kern, he's an early enrollee. He was one of the top offensive linemen in high school football a year ago. Reports are, he came in as a guard. He could play tackle as well. Could he get first-team reps, whether it's Adams, Davis, Carius Kern? And then look at some veteran guys that are trying to crack that starting lineup. Guys like Bo Bordelon. There's a number of guys on this LSU roster that can really benefit from a guy like Josh Thompson not being there. And it's not just the names we know, right? I mean, there's a number of guys. Kari Lee, the guy who redshirted a year ago. Look, he's 6'6", 300 pounds. He's got some versatility. Tyler Moore, the freshman. I mentioned Solomon Thomas. How about Bo Bordelon's younger brother, Brett Bordelon? He's coming in as a freshman. Ethan Galloway, Weston Davis, Tyree Adams, Ori Williams. He's a guy who we heard a little bit about last fall. He didn't get on the field much. Josh Thompson, I'm not worried about as much because I think Josh Thompson's going to be fine. He's been a 4-year starter in the Big Ten at Northwestern, and he started at 2 different positions. I think Josh Thompson's going to be fine, and I think he's going to have one of these starting positions on the offensive line. That's why you brought him in. You needed a veteran plug-and-play guy, and it didn't really matter which position. I think that's going to happen. But now that he's not there, you can have a battle at tackle and one of the guard spots, assuming Paul Mabinga locks down that left guard spot, which is where he started at the end of last season after Garrett Dellinger went down from injury. And I get it, Paul Mabinga didn't start great by any means, but he basically got better every single game. Look, remember the guys who played in the bowl game? A very similar lineup to what we just heard, except Miles Frazier was in there because he played in that bowl game. Very similar lineup to the bowl game. And the guys in the bowl game played really well. I mean, that was the biggest concern for a lot of people going into that game was who's going to be your offensive line? Sure, Garrett Nussmeier looked really good against Oklahoma and Vanderbilt to close out the season. Who's going to be up front blocking for him? They did really well. I don't believe they allowed a sack in that game. That offensive line was really good. All of them were younger guys. Some of them are back this year. Get those guys more reps. Because again, Thompson's been there, done that. He's going to be fine. I'm not super worried about a guy like Josh Thompson getting reps in the spring. Plus, he'll still be here for the second half of spring. He'll still have the spring game. He'll be here for summer workouts. He'll have all of fall camp. He'll be fine. But these young guys can get valuable reps. They can battle it out for a spot. Here's a worst case scenario. None of the younger guys look like they're ready to grasp a full-time starting position, but you're building quality depth and competition behind a Josh Thompson when he comes back. That's worst case scenario, which still doesn't seem that bad. Best case scenario is that some of these freshmen and guys that maybe redshirted a year ago blow the coaching staff away. They want them in the starting lineup, and Josh Thompson has to come in and fight for a job. That's best case scenario. So again, you want to see all your guys in there. And then when the initial report came out that Josh Thompson was not going to be there, for the start of spring practice, everyone kind of raises an eyebrow a little bit like, hold up, wait a minute, what's going on? The guy's getting his degree from a prestigious university like Northwestern. Imagine that, right? A guy wanting to get his degree from Northwestern. How wild. He'll be back reportedly around March 27th. So he'll hit the back half of spring. He won't miss everything. He's played enough football to where he knows what he's doing. So again, you don't want to never not have some of your best players or some of your more talented guys that are projected to be starters. But if you're going to have to, this might be the area to do it because you're bringing in a super experienced guy. I would be more concerned if one of the younger guys had to miss spring. Like if you told me, oh, well, there's an issue with one of your younger guys like Weston Davis or Carius Curran or whatever, and they're going to miss spring. That would worry me a whole lot more than Josh Thompson not being there for the first 2 weeks of spring practice. It's not something I'm super concerned with. But anyways, Josh Thompson will not be there for the first half of spring practice. He is finishing up his degree at Northwestern. He is projected to be back at LSU around March 27th. All right, look, we're going to take a quick timeout. When I get back, LSU women's basketball wrapped up their SEC tournament run. We'll talk a little bit about that, kind of recap the season, what we want to see from them in the NCAA tournament when it's coming up. We'll also mention a little bit of men's basketball as well. It's coming up on the other side here on the Hunt Palmer Show, 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is the website. Property and casualty or group employee benefits. Your one-stop shop for all things insurance is, of course, the Highland Insurance Group. If you're a business owner and you don't have a great relationship with your insurance broker, they're just the guy who came with the lowest premium number, that's one way to handle it, but it might not be the best way, especially when something happens. Whether it's a hurricane or a car accident or a cyber breach or a lawsuit or an injury. When that happens, you're going to need your insurance to respond. And if you only have the insurance in place because it was the cheapest one, it may not. Jonathan Carver and his team can be a trusted advisor and a part of your team as a business to make sure that your business continues to run even if the event happens. Give them a call. Or check them out online, HighlandIG.com. They're right here in Baton Rouge, but they can help you out statewide. It's Jonathan Carver and his team at the Highland Insurance Group. They're online at HighlandIG.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Welcome back in. Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp sitting in for Hunt Palmer today, as well as the next few days in all likelihood. Okay, so the LSU women's basketball team have wrapped up their run in the SEC tournament. They get a victory over Florida in their round one game because LSU, of course, had that first round bye. If you like points in basketball, you were a fan of this game. LSU wins it 101-87. The Lady Tigers actually set an SEC tournament record on the women's side of things in terms of points in an SEC tournament game. When you look at the numbers, you can see why it was so high scoring. Florida shot a hair over 47% as far as field goal percentage. LSU over 50%. 79% from the line for the Tigers, 82% from the line for the Gators. It was pretty evenly matched for most of the game. The big difference for LSU was Anissa Morrow, because if you look at Florida, they had 6 players in double figures. However, their highest scorer was Liv McGill, who had 16 points. For LSU, they had only 4 players in double figures. However, Anissa Morrow went off in that game. 36 points, 14 rebounds. Coming into this SEC tournament, we had talked about it a little bit. The women just flat out weren't playing well. They had lost 2 out of their last 3 coming into this. And without Flau'jae Johnson, who missed the SEC tournament, you needed someone to step up offensively. If I told you going into the Florida game, hey, you beat a decent Florida team, you set the SEC tournament record for points in a game, you didn't have Flau'jae Johnson, and your best player, Michaela Williams, only scored 16 points and had an off shooting night, you probably would not have believed me. But that's exactly what happened. Michaela Williams, 16 points, 5 rebounds. Didn't have her best stuff offensively. She did have 8 assists, though. She kind of ran the show for him offensively. Who's going to step up for you outside of Michaela Williams and Anissa Morrow? First off, Anissa Morrow upped her game. I mentioned 36 points, 14 rebounds, another double-double for Anissa Morrow. That's 102 in her college career. But with Morrow stepping up and Michaela Williams kind of dropping a little bit, you needed somebody to pick up the slack. You got it from multiple people. Kaylin Gilbert, who's been hot and cold off the bench, she scored 10 points. She had 3 assists. She had 2 rebounds. She was very efficient coming off the bench scoring for you. Miracle Shepard, who's kind of been inserted into that starting lineup. She's a freshman. She had double digits. She poured in 12 points. Samaya Smith didn't light up the stat sheet, but she did a lot of good things defensively. She had 7 points and 6 rebounds. Sure, their defense lacked at times, which is why Florida was able to score 87 points. But the big things was fouls. I mean, each team committed 20 fouls. LSU also turned the ball over 13 times. They were a little sloppy. I mentioned they shot over 50% from the court, so it wasn't a shooting issue. It was defensively. That's why you gave up 87 points. So while they had a high-scoring game there that they were ultimately able to pull away from at the end, their next game against Texas Longhorns looked drastically different. Texas beat your LSU Lady Tigers 56-49 on Saturday night. A very, very low-scoring game. And the reason for it, you had 2 LSU Tigers in double figures. You had Michaela Williams with 11 points, and then Anissa Morrow, who left that game with an injury. Reports are, though, she's going to be fine for the NCAA tournament. It was nothing serious. Michaela Williams with 11, Anissa Morrow with 10 points. Outside of that, you had one player score 8 and Miracle Shepard, everybody else 5 and lower. You just didn't have it offensively. You shot over 50% against Florida. You shot 33% against Texas. You actually outshot Texas. Texas only shot 31%. You shot 25% from 3. Here's the big difference. You outshot Texas from the court and from the three-point line. Texas, though, 17 of 20 from the foul line for 85%. The LSU women, 9 for 17 for just 53%. That's losing basketball. You're already shorthanded with Flau'jae Johnson, and then Anissa Morrow had to leave the game. And you get outshot 85-52 from the free throw line. There's an old saying in basketball that continues to ring true. Always make more free throws than the other team attempts. Texas basically did that. They made 17 free throws. LSU only attempted 17 free throws. Texas was just more aggressive. Because again, neither team shot well from the court. Texas, though, they were able to drive the lane. They were able to have a mismatch down low without Anissa Morrow in there. They were able to take advantage of it. LSU was forced to foul them, and Texas made them pay from the free throw line. You out-rebounded 43-32. That's kind of expected at this point. LSU's not great at rebounds outside of Morrow. Again, turnovers hurt you. You turned the ball over 15 times. You committed 26 personal fouls in this game. So you win a really, really high-scoring game. You lose a very low-scoring game. But here's why I come out of this with a little bit of confidence. You almost pulled out a victory against Texas. You lose by 7, obviously, 56-49. I always talk about it, regardless of sport, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, finding different ways to win games makes you a better basketball team. You're not always going to be able to go out there and score 101 points. If you can score 101 and win the game, by all means, do it. Sometimes it comes down to this. You were able to hold Texas to 56. You dang near beat them. You were without Flau'jae Johnson, one of your best players. Your other player, Anissa Morrow, was injured all throughout the game. And Michaela Williams had an off night, and you still almost beat this team. If LSU could put those two things together, play defense the way they did against Texas, while shooting the ball better, while getting fully healthy, then this team's going to be a tough out regardless of who they play in the NCAA tournament. Now, how far do I realistically think the LSU women's basketball team is going to go in the NCAA tournament? I don't know. Do I think this team can win it all? I don't. I'll be flat out honest with you. I don't think they can. If they can, it'll be because of the brilliance of Kim Mulkey. She's one of the best coaches in the business. There's no question about that. The problems I have with this team, even with a healthy Flau'jae Johnson and Anissa Mara, outside of Michaela Williams, you don't have a super consistent three-point shooter. I mean, Flau'jae gets hot at times, but she's a little inconsistent there. For the second year in a row, you don't have a true point guard. And then even as good as Morrow is down low, she's a little bit undersized. You don't have a dominant post player. So no dominant post player. Very limited on three-point shooting and no true point guard. This team is where they are because of Kim Mulkey. Now, look, obviously there's talented players. I mean, Morrow's great. Michaela Williams, I sat up here last week on Off the Bench and said that I don't know if there's 10 players in the country better than Michaela Williams as far as an all-around basketball player. And then Flau'jae Johnson's one of the most talented guards in the country. We get that. Outside of those three is what I'm really concerned about. Because again, Miracle Shepherd stepped up in a big way. Can she continue to do that? Kaylin Gilbert, she'll have a hot shooting night off the bench. She'll have a little bit of a colder shooting night when she comes in off the bench. You need consistency a little bit more from your big-time role players. Because while I like this team, there's a lot they need to work on. And look, I see the comment about, oh, well, you should have kept Haley Van Lith because she's had a good season at TCU. Haley Van Lith never fit this team, mainly because you didn't have a point guard on last year's team. You were kind of forced to play Haley Van Lith at point guard, and she's not a true point guard. Look at what she did at Louisville. Look at what she's done at TCU. That's at the two-guard spot. You kind of already have that two-guard in Flau'jae Johnson. So I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, you know, they never should have let her go. I get it. Hindsight's 20/20, but she struggled on this team. She was a good player, but she struggled on this team, at least for consistency. All right, that'll do it for LSU women's basketball. As far as the men's team goes, look, it was a disappointing loss and the end to what was a very disappointing men's basketball season. The Tigers finished with just 3 wins in SEC play. They wound up losing by 14 points to the Texas A&M Aggies on Saturday night. But LSU actually had a lead going into halftime. They were up 32-30 at halftime. Problem is, Texas A&M came out scorching in the second half. LSU wound up only putting up 20 points in that second half. You just don't have quite enough right now. I get it. You have some injuries. You haven't had Jalen Reed for most of the season. Jalen Reed should not make that big of an impact on a team like LSU. Turns out he does because you had nothing behind him. Jordan Sears is actually the one that kept you in the ballgame. Usually we hear that from Cam Carter. Jordan Sears, 21 points. The next highest scorer was Mike Williams with 8. Cam Carter had an off night. Now, credit to Texas A&M. They guarded him closely. They were able to shut him down for the most part. Cam Carter, 7 points. Actually didn't have any until the second half. Jai Bailey with 3 points. Again, Mike Williams with 8. This LSU team, for whatever reason, cannot seem to put it all together. Some nights you'll have Cam Carter go off. Nobody gives him any support offensively. Some nights you'll have a Damian Collins, a Jordan Sears. Guys like that have a really good night offensively, and Cam Carter has an off night. This team cannot put it together. Again, it's a disappointing loss, and it ends a very, very disappointing season. LSU's not going to the NCAA tournament. They're not going to have anything to play for, if at all. There is a slight rumor they could get into the NIT. I don't see that happening. It's just a slight rumor at this point. Where do you go moving forward for this LSU basketball team? As you look at some of the guys that have been staples in this lineup, Jordan Sears, Jai Bailey, Cam Carter, they're all seniors. In terms of guys you could potentially get back, Robert Miller is a freshman, and while he had an off night, look, 2 points, 1 rebound, you have to be better at that. He's looked pretty good down the stretch. He's shown flashes. Can you get Mike Williams back? Can you get Curtis Givens back? Can you get Damian Collins back? You've also missed Corey Chest the last 4 or 5 games of the season. He has an opportunity to return as well. It's up to Matt McMahon to get all these guys back on campus. Because look, in the NIL world and the transfer portal era, especially in basketball, because you only got about 12 guys, you could have a completely different roster from year to year now. this staff's going to have some tough decisions to make. One, they're going to have to spend some money. There's reports that LSU is investing a lot heavier in NIL when it comes to college basketball. And you're going to have some tough decisions to make with where do we spend this money and do we let any of our returning guys walk? It's tough decisions to make. Do you even want to bring back a Collins or a Chest or a Robert Miller? I actually say yes to all three of those. Williams and Givens gets a little bit more tough, but I mean, look, Robert Miller late in the season showing flashes. Damian Collins has been a really solid player for you. If he wants to come back, I think you do welcome him back. And Corey Chess was good defensively. He has a lot to work on offensive-wise, but he was a highly recruited guy coming into LSU. He redshirted last season. This was his first year in action. Kind of got thrown in there a little bit. Had to take on a bigger role than probably what Coach Matt McMahon and the rest of the staff wanted him to take on because of the early injury to Jalen Reed, which forced him to miss the entire season. So again, a disappointing end to a disappointing season. Where will this men's team go next? As far as the women, they still have a lot to play for. Looks like they're going to likely be somewhere between a 3 or a 4 seed in the upcoming bracket when it is released. We'll see how far Kim Mulkey can take the Lady Tigers. All right, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we get back, we're going to wrap up the show like we do every day with a little bit of Take It or Leave It. That's coming up next on the Hunt Palmer Show. 104.5 ESPN.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. They're the only fully exclusive Genesis dealer in the state of Louisiana, and they're right here in Baton Rouge. I told y'all earlier this week, we were driving, my wife goes, oh, that's that car I really like. It's a Genesis. And she had no idea that I even do this. I was like, yeah, they're really nice. They're really, really nice. And you should know it too. You don't see a ton of Genesis on the road because it's fairly new to our city here. They've only been at that location for a year and a half, but go check it out. It's a luxury vehicle. It's a luxury experience to be a Genesis driver. That means 3 years of complimentary maintenance, a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. It's a luxury experience at a reasonable price over at Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every single car that's on the lot at Genesis of Baton Rouge is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. And all of them, every single model, from the entry level to the highest end, come with the same safety features. Safety is a priority for Genesis. Go check them out. Genesis of Baton Rouge. They're online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. That's Genesis of Baton Rouge.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Registration for the Effects European Bracket Challenge is now open. You can start registering now at 1045ESPN.com, and then be sure to come back and get your picks in after the first games are announced. The selection Sunday, the person with the most accurate picks this year will win $1,000 in cash. You can also join us at the Louisiana Outdoor Expo at the Lamar Dixon Expo Center this weekend, March 14th through the 16th. Head over to our front or back booth and register for your chance to win a U10 new canoe, a compact, versatile kayak perfect for fishing and hunting adventures. Visit 1045ESPN.com for details.
All right, welcome back in. Final segment, Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp sitting in the big boy chair for our guy Hunt Palmer, who is out being a dad. Literally, him and his wife had their second child yesterday afternoon. Congratulations to Hunt Palmer. He will be back presumably a little bit later this week. We're not quite sure on that yet, but he'll be back at some point. All right, let's close out the show like we do every day. Mr. Jacob Beck with Take It or Leave It.
Take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it.
Today's hottest stories in sports, news, and sometimes even Hunt's life. The question is, will he take them or leave them?
Just take it.
All right, first the one here. DK Metcalf to the Steelers. Take it or leave it.
I'm taking this. I think this is a great trade for the Steelers. Reports were this weekend that the Seahawks actually lowered their asking price. They originally wanted a first and third round pick. They settled for a second round pick. So, look, you get a really good receiver for a second-round pick. You pair him with a George Pickens. You still have Najee Harris in the backfield, regardless of who your quarterback is. Russell Wilson, there's reports it could be Aaron Rodgers. Whoever it is, they're going to have a ton of weapons to throw to. You still have Pat Freiermuth. I like the potential of this offense. I think it was a good signing.
All right, next one here. Bowling Green has hired Eddie George as its next head football coach. Take it or leave it.
I'm going to take it. I'll take it. Eddie George was at Tennessee State for a number of years. He's at Bowling Green now, which isn't terribly far from Columbus, Ohio, where he was able to win the Heisman Trophy. Look, more and more former players are getting hired at lower level schools and making their way up. Deion Sanders started at Jackson State. He's at Colorado now. He's entering his third season. Michael Vick just got hired at Norfolk State. He'll be in his first year as a college football head coach. For what it's worth, Eddie George, his team actually went 9-4 a year ago. They made the FCS playoffs for the first time since like 2013, I believe it was. So he did some nice things there. We'll see what he can do at Bowling Green. I like it.
Next one, this is probably one of the bigger headlines from the NFL today. Justin Fields signed a 2-year, $40 million deal with the New York Jets, with a majority of that guaranteed. Take it or leave it.
I'll leave it only because this might be my only leave it of the day. However, I could kind of go either way on this one. For those who know me and have listened to me on Off the Bench on this show when I fill in, knows that I am no fan of Justin Fields. I don't think Justin Fields is a very good quarterback. However, you're the New York Jets. You don't have anything. You have Garrett Wilson. You got a couple good running backs. That's pretty much it. You just got rid of Devontae Adams. Aaron Rodgers is not re-signing with your team. What do you actually have? Can Justin Fields' athleticism give you something offensively? And like Beck just mentioned, 2-year, $40 million deal, only $30 million of it guaranteed. So you're essentially paying a starting quarterback $15 million a year. You're not going to get much better than that. So I think it was a good signing money-wise. I just don't know how Justin Fields is going to work in New York.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad signing for them. I take a chance. I mean, what do they have to lose at this point? The Jets have just completely fumbled the bag with Aaron Rodgers. Not all to their fault, of course, but it didn't work out. So you might as well take a chance on a younger quarterback who was a first round pick.
What is Aaron Rodgers going to do? Aaron Rodgers is going to be like me and you, sitting on his couch on Sundays in the fall. Like, it sounds like he's like begging the New York Giants to take him. The Raiders are obviously not doing that anymore.
Well, like who said.
And then he was linked to the Seahawks. They're obviously not doing that. If I'm the Steelers, I'm just keeping Russell Wilson at this point. Like, he's a lot less of a media distraction than Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers is in a tough spot. Yeah, I hate to see it.
All right, last one here. The 49ers and Chargers are reportedly in talks with Jameis Winston to sign him as a backup. Take it or leave it.
I'm going to take it.
I'll take it.
So, look, I have criticized Jameis Winston's ability to be a starting quarterback in the NFL multiple times. Me and T-Bob, we have a playful banter back and forth on OTB about this exact topic pretty much all the time. But the way I've always said it is, I will take Jameis Winston on my team depending on what your goal is. If your goal is to have him as a starting quarterback and intentionally lose to get a higher draft pick, I'm for it. I think Jameis Winston, one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL, which is why I'm taking this. I think Jameis is a very good locker room guy. Every team that he's on appears to love him. I mean, you saw him at the Super Bowl doing all the interviews, doing all that for Fox Sports. I mean, he was awesome. He had like 128 million views over that entire Super Bowl week. The guy is a rock star when it comes to the media. Excellent personality. Again, like I mentioned, excellent locker room guy. And if I need him for 2 or 3 games to come in and be my starting quarterback, I'm good with that. But if your goal is to win games as a starting quarterback, I don't think Jameis Winston is your guy because I don't think he's a very good quarterback. However, as a backup and to boost team morale, I am all for it. I think this was a great signing for whoever gets him.
Well, I'm kind of, if I'm the 49ers or Chargers, I'm kind of looking back at his history, and it seems like everywhere he goes, the starter gets hurt and he ends up playing. So almost like, man, is Jameis Winston like bad luck for the starting quarterback for my team? Because everywhere he goes, he ends up playing. So
yeah, but again,
obviously not a serious thought, but just something that pretty funny to consider.
Well, and who are you going to get other than Jameis Winston? That's better in that role.
Not great options.
There's nobody you're going to get. I mean, look at some of the free agents. Again, Sam Darnold's off the market now. You're not going to go get Aaron Rodgers because he doesn't have the ego or the want to be a backup quarterback. I mean, Jameis Winston, probably your best option. All right, that's going to do it for a Monday edition of Off the Bench. We'll be back tomorrow. We got a lot to break down. Saints, LSU spring practice, some LSU baseball. Matt Moscona driving you home.
The Hunt Palmer Show.